your irrigation system is hitting your street. All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Oh, and of course,
I really do appreciate it.
yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Well, since the time we put together this program, or CE and the Panhandle Bunch put this program together, and today, our director of the Texas Water Development Board has, that director has actually become the chairman of the Water Development Board. Peter Lake has been with the Water Development Board since December 2015 when Governor Abbott appointed him. Last Thursday, I was sitting in a meeting in San Antonio listening to one of his presentations and got a notice that the governor had just appointed him chairman of the board. For those of you who don't know what the Water Development Board is, Peter will fill you in on this, but as a groundwater conservation district or city public water supply, the board is an integral part of us developing and implementing conservation measures and finding ways to pay for infrastructure from everything from public water supply to irrigated agriculture. And the board's deeply involved in that in all phases, along with water planning. Chairman Lake has held a variety of financial roles across a number of industries. Previously, he acted as a director of research and the head of automated trading at Gambit Trading, a member firm of the Chicago Board of Trade and the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. This is an extremely valuable background for what the Water Development Board does for our state today in providing a funding source for many of the projects that we build in the state. Chairman Lake graduated with a Bachelor's of Arts degree from Public Policy with a specialization in economics from the University of Chicago, and he earned a Master's of Business Administration from Stanford University's Graduate School of Business. I believe this is the first conference that Chairman Lake will speak at as chairman of the Water Development Board, so I expect you'll have all sorts of questions for him when he's at the end. It's my pleasure to welcome Chairman Lake.
Sir. Thank you, Steve, for that very kind introduction. I'm impressed you stayed awake during my presentation last week. And hope you stay awake through this one too. Appreciate the kind words. Very excited for opportunity to serve as chairman. The one downside of having our new board member, who we're very excited about, Brooke Popp, is that I no longer get to claim to be the new guy. And that was my favorite way to dodge questions that I didn't want to answer, is claim I'm the new guy. I've been here years and years, but I'm still going to back out of it by being the new guy. Anyway, thanks to CE and the City of Amarillo and the Groundwater Conservation District for having us. Both those organizations have been great partners with the Water Development Board for a really long time. And I know there are a lot of folks in the audience who are great partners with us. Appreciate those relationships and the good work we do together. First of all, I'd like to talk about the Water Development Board and a brief intro. I'm not sure. Get the slides going. There we go. Water Development Board was founded in the 50s after the devastating drought of that decade. There are three major components of what we do. The first is water science. That's using our scientific and technical expertise to identify and quantify the water resources we have in the state. That's modeling underground aquifers and the availability of water there. That's measuring surface water, stream flows. That's measuring bays and estuaries. That lays the foundation for our water planning function. I hope all of you know about our state water plan. If you don't, it's essentially a 50-year look ahead to identify the water supplies that we've got, the water demands that we're going to have over the next 50 years, and then figuring out how we're going to come up with new water supplies to meet our future demands. That's a major part of what we do. Several people have mentioned it today. I appreciate all the people who participate in the regional planning process. That's critical in developing the overall state water plan. And that water plan lays the foundation for our water financing component. We're in a large part are a water infrastructure bank, and we use that financing component to provide the resources, financial resources, to turn the plans into actual projects. We want to make sure the state has the water infrastructure it needs for the next 50 years. And today I really want to focus on the value of our water and the value of conservation, and then talk about how that fits into our SWIFT program. SWIFT is the State Water Implementation Fund for Texas. It's our flagship financing program, and we've done a lot of good work with it. It's only been around for 3 years, so we've got a long way to go, but we've done a lot of good work on it so far. The state water plan is based on what we call water management strategies. These are just the types of projects that municipality or city or river authority will use to come up with new water supply that we need in the future. I've listed them here from least expensive to most expensive, and these are the most prominent project or water management strategies in the state water plan. Obviously, conservation is the cheapest. You're getting more mileage and usage out of the water you've already got. You don't have to go find new water. You don't have to build it. You don't have to buy it. That's usually the cheapest. You go through other surface water. That's connecting existing water resources with the demand. That can be new pipelines, expanded pipelines, increased treatment capacity at a water treatment plant, all the way to reservoirs are a little more expensive. You get up to desalination, which is the most expensive on average across the state in the state water plan. And Carol gave such a lovely presentation earlier, and she pointed out that conservation, one of the conservation programs she highlighted saves, I think, 534 billion gallons a year. And when you translate that into acre feet per year, it comes out to 1.6 million acre feet a year. And that's through conservation. If you think about a new major reservoir, most of them that are in the state water plan, and reservoirs take a lot to get done, as y'all know. Most major new reservoirs will get you 100,000 acre feet. So it gives you some context on the conservation, the magnitude of conservation versus other types of water projects. And when you lay out the different water management strategies, how we're going to get new water supply in the state, you can start thinking about, as I've outlined here, the cost that goes into it. Those are the cost inputs, how much it costs for men, mules, and equipment, the labor, the land, the backhoes, all of that. That's the cost input. But what I really want to encourage y'all to think about today is the value of the water that you get as a result of these projects. And when you think about the value of water, it really changes over time. It is not really a fixed number. If you think about it, the horizontal axis as time, and then you look at a vertical axis of quantity. You start with thinking about the supply of water. How much water do you have? And what I'll call the flood side of the spectrum, you got plenty of water. But as the amount of water you have available drops to the drought side, water supply is a lot lower. And at the end of the day, all of us live somewhere on this spectrum. At some point, at any given point in time, we're somewhere on that flood drought spectrum. And of course, the demand for water, like Russell was just saying, changes pretty drastically over time. When you're on the drought side of that spectrum, the demand is a lot higher. But when you're on the flood side of that spectrum, nobody wants any water. And Jeff was talking about Hurricane Harvey in Houston this summer. Nobody wanted any water, And if you tried to put a value on that water, it probably has a negative value. I'll pay you to get this water out of here. It's causing tremendous damage. So it can have a very, very low or negative value on the flood side of the spectrum. But when you get into the drought side of the spectrum, it can have tremendous value. So August of 2012, as y'all know, any extra gallon or acre foot of water had tremendous value in ag, municipal, industry, mining. August of 2013, another year of drought, that value increases even more. And so thinking about the value of that water that results from the water supply you create can help you give a sense of what kind of return on investment you'll get by utilizing these different water management strategies, whatever they are, desalination, conjunctive use, or conservation. Take reservoir, for example, and it's kind of middle of the pack on cost. If you remember that list from the beginning, cheapest from most expensive, what kind of return on an investment do you get from a reservoir? Well, when it's flooding, it's negative. You don't need, why do we have a reservoir? It's flooding. We're letting it out as fast as we can. No real return on investment. But you move to the drought side of the spectrum, and in Texas, at some point, you will be in that drought. You will be on that drought spectrum. All the water that you saved up in that reservoir has tremendous value. And the longer you're in the drought, the more valuable that water is going to be. And you can apply this to each of the water management strategies that folks use in Texas. Conservation, cheapest one we've got, is pretty much always a good idea. Always a good idea to conserve water when you can. And you can move up through aquifer storage and recovery. There's a reservoir, groundwater. Reuse is more expensive. And Senator Seliger had some great comments about water reuse in Big Spring and things like that. It's more expensive on the cost input side to put that project into play, but you're still going to have a return on your investment when you're on the drought side of that spectrum. Conjunctive use, desalination, all of these strategies have different cost inputs, but at some point, they'll deliver a return on investment. And a few of these are even more optimal because they're what I call bridge strategies that take advantage of being on the flood side of the spectrum. They capture that water and save it for future use. Conjunctive use is utilizing your surface water resources when they're available, and therefore preserving your groundwater resources when you don't have the surface water. Aquifer storage and recovery is simply an underground storage savings account for your water. Reservoirs, a savings account for your water on the surface. And again, these strategies are ways to optimize the return on your investment in water infrastructure. But of course, when you're trying to come to realizing this value, if you look at all of the different water management strategies we've got, conservation will deliver by far the greatest value, return on investment, however you want to think about it. Other strategies, like I said, even if they're more expensive, that cost input side is more expensive. Conjunctive use, desalination, at some point will still deliver value. But my favorite part about this is how it highlights the tremendous value that you get from conservation. It far and away, and there are a lot of different ways to do it, but far and away the biggest return on investment is conservation. So how does that fit into the SWIFT program? We've launched the SWIFT program a few years ago. It's really become the flagship program at the Water Development Board. It is built for funding projects in the state water plan. And it, by definition, those are new water supply, a lot of conservation, a lot of potable reuse in those strategies. And of course, the SWIFT program is designed to provide benefits that incentivize folks around the state to participate in the planning process to get to that state water plan. Those incentives are found in our financing options. We provide low interest loans, deferred loans where the borrower doesn't have to worry about principal or interest for a few years, and they catch up on the end. The SWIFT program will cover the first few years of the principal and interest. And then board participation, where the Water Development Board essentially buys a share of the project, even if the current need isn't there for that project. We'd rather see folks, for example, build a reservoir and right-size it on the front end, build it for the future growth, even if the current tax base isn't there, the population isn't there. And then we'll sell that share of the reservoir back to the project sponsor at a later date. But we want to make sure that we're right-sizing projects and not trying to do it piecemeal over the decades as we move forward. These benefits can be tremendous. We'll pay a substantial part of the interest on a 20 or 30-year loan. That adds up over time. And of course, conservation always plays a big role. The benefits that we've seen so far in the SWIFT program, most of these are in the form of low-interest loans, where the SWIFT program is covering a big chunk of your interest on these water infrastructure projects every year. In our first year, that was $108 million of benefits provided. That's $108 million from the SWIFT program going to local municipalities, Waco, Amarillo, Lubbock, Dallas, Marfa. That's real money going right now to help subsidize these water infrastructure programs. 2016, that was $75 million. 2017, it was $133 million of benefit in this, through the SWIFT program to get folks involved in part of the planning process and to get these water infrastructure projects started sooner rather than later, for a grand total of $316 million of savings over the first 3 years of the program. Even that little guy's a fan of that. Of course, when you have all these benefits, people pay attention and are hopefully incentivized to come participate in our SWIFT program. As a result, we've had to develop a SWIFT prioritization so we can rank, and we're required to by statute, we can rank the projects that come in the door. So far, we've been able to provide financing for all of the projects that have applied to the SWIFT program. There may come a point where we're not able to do that. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but that's why we have this prioritization process. And it incorporates a lot of different things, as you can see. How important is any given project considered by the regional planning group? That's local input on, like Senator Seliger mentioned, local folks know their water needs, know their resources, and are probably the best ones to figure out how to move forward in providing water supply. That's important. We want to make sure these projects serve substantial populations, but you also, part of the prioritization is an urban-rural mix. It's very important to the state that rural communities aren't left out in the cold, and this doesn't just serve the major metropolitan areas. And you can go around the chart there and see the different factors and how much they weigh into the prioritization. And of course, the most important thing I want to highlight is water conservation. Water conservation, whether or not a project includes water conservation, is a major part of prioritizing that project in the SWIFT program. So if you want to get in line for that $316 million of benefits, water conservation can play a big role in making sure a project gets access to that program. Which of course begs the question, what actually counts as conservation? I'm not going to read through the entire Texas Water Code definition, but the net result is conservation covers a lot. Some people tend to get certain kinds of strategies or technologies or concepts in their mind as what counts for conservation. And I really, really want to encourage y'all to not limit your thoughts on what counts as conservation to just a few kind of headline items. Anything that more efficiently manages your water resources at the end of the day is really conservation. That can cover kind of the most basic things that we think about, like irrigation meters have been very, very successful voluntary programs around the state, play a big role in helping manage those resources. Precision irrigation, your LIPA, your LISA, getting more mileage, more efficient irrigation out of the same water resource. And you can move on up the kind of spectrum of high-tech, fancy capabilities. You start getting into advanced metering infrastructure where your utilities getting a lot more precision reading at the local level. And that's usually combined with very high-grade software at the utility level to understand where your water's going, solve underbilling problems. Of course, folks don't always, your residents don't always appreciate that first water bill they get after you really have accurate meters in place. But over the long run, they do eventually develop an appreciation for knowing what they're doing with their water resources, whether it's watering the lawn or household use. At the end of the day, it's a good thing, and we've seen most communities end up embracing it. You can go up to SCADA systems for irrigation. You get more efficient management of the resource. You're getting more mileage out of the same water resource using the supervisory control and data acquisition. I can never remember what that acronym stands for. But it can get into pretty high-tech stuff. You can go all the way to multispectral imaging from drones for plant health, soil moisture, things like that, and combine that with your precision irrigation. And that's kind of next level drone operation stuff. But it can play a big role in optimizing your water resources. All of this is conservation. But it can also be the most basic of things. Pipeline replacement, it probably plays one of the larger roles in water conservation in the U.S. today. We see entities all over the state and all over the country that are operating day to day with 30% water loss between the water treatment plant and your house. It's not high-grade flashy technology, but pipeline replacement is something that can make a major difference and is, at the end of the day, conservation and will play a role in access to funding through the SWIFT program. We've done a lot of conservation programs in SWIFT that we're proud of. You can see some of them here. A lot of advanced metering infrastructure, some irrigation improvements, pipeline replacement. But we always want to see more conservation programs or projects in the SWIFT program. It's good for the state, and even if it's not in the SWIFT program or some of our other programs and our ag program, we always want to encourage conservation in any form that it takes. It can be any of the above or any of a wide range of other strategies. Want to make sure to cover some of our funding programs. We've got a lot more than the SWIFT program. Like I said, that's kind of our flagship program. I'd also want to mention the Agriculture Water Conservation Loan and Grant Program. The ag conservation grants usually open up once a year depending on fund availability. That application window just closed last month, but our water conservation loan program for ag is always open. Again, depends on availability of funds, but that's always open. Our state revolving funds for clean water, drinking water, that's wastewater treatment and water treatment, or have some grant components or loan forgiveness components, but are always open for very low interest loans, as well as our development fund. Again, low interest loans for a wide range of water infrastructure projects. At the end of the day, it's never too early to start. Noah started building the ark before the rain came, and you definitely don't want to be these guys. Even if it looks like the upfront cost will be, upfront cost is substantial on your water infrastructure projects. Please remember that at some point on the flood drought spectrum, we all live there at different points every day. You will get a return on that investment in your water infrastructure. So please plan and build the water infrastructure that you need before you need it. Participate in the state water plan process, and let us know what we can do to help. At the Water Development Board is a list of the regional project teams for the different parts of the state. We're always happy to talk about any project and which program it might be best for. We're happy to mix and match funding from one program or another program to give the borrower the best possible, lowest cost financing. So with that, I will wrap up and happy to answer any questions y'all might have.
Any questions for Peter?
Largest project so far is going to be the Houston. The question was, what's the largest project we've done so far in SWIFT? And that will, to date, has been the Northeast Treatment Plant project in Houston. But most recently, we've just started the process for the Lower Bodark Reservoir, funding that northeast of Dallas, which will provide a major new water supply source for the northern Metroplex. I think at the end of the day, that will be the largest project we've funded once we get through that entire process.